Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to present Daniel Rosenberg, who's been kind enough to come down from Cambridge to talk to us today about his model of a process of design. I will leave him to give you the important details, but he has a practice in individual and collective designing that I think is quite important. Daniel and I connected through the ideas of cybernetics, I think, and we overlapped at some conferences. And he kindly invited me to speak at a series that he organized at MIT in the PhD program there called Cybernetics and Design. And I'm thrilled to be able to reciprocate on this occasion and have him come to New York.
That was our agreement, no? I invited you because...
I don't remember that part.
It took you like 2 years to invite me back.
I'm slow. It's called slow food, slow code, slow inviting. But we made it. We also had a great time that day, I remember, because Marvin Minsky was supposed to come to my talk and he couldn't. But we roped him into coming to a seminar with you and your colleagues. And Marvin and his wife, Gloria, were wonderful and very open, and we had a really fantastic conversation. And with that in mind, we do want to turn this into a conversation soon. And Daniel will speak for about 40 minutes, and then we'll get into it, and then there's drinks, and we hope some more conviviality in the other room. I'll leave, again, Daniel to speak exactly why he does what he does. I feel that it's important because it's ethical, because he has a point of view on design which is different, or part of this shift away from designing for users to designing with and by users. But he will make the distinction much more subtly than I just have. Most important to me is that he wants designers to be aware of the responsibility of the relationship between designers and designed for, or designed by, or designed with. We call these people users. It's a horrible word. But I think his methodology brings us more toward participants, which could be one of a better word. And with that, I'll leave Daniel to explain. Thank you.
I was wondering if like people come maybe the man come closer.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's a great idea. We should come in.
So first of all, I'm very happy to be here, also in this great city. I really like New York, and thanks, Paul, for inviting me today, even though it took him a while. So I like to start with this image, which is, I don't know if you recognize it, but it's an image from this story about the great inventor Daedalus creating these wings for Icarus. To somehow illustrate the great moment that we're living today, where we have this amazing moment for us, where new interactive technologies are kind of changing the way we live more than ever. And I say more than ever because we all know that through design we are continuously changing the way we live, but lately, through these new technologies, where kind of the rate of change is increasing much more. And this is, I promise this is the only boring graph I'm going to show today. I put it at the beginning. But it shows very briefly, just to show that it takes so much time to kind of adopt certain technology. But today, and we all know, we can experience this in every moment of, even in our daily life, how new things appear. And actually, probably you are also like bringing these things to the world, and they are changing the way we live. And this is also, and you know this, I was asking Paul about this school. I mean, this school, I think it's 6 years old. Design also is being redefined, and it's becoming really like, before, I don't know, like 10 years ago, design was maybe related to graphic, industrial, architecture, but today, form making. And today it's been redefined, and we are realizing that designers, we have actually like a big responsibility, and I will come back to this idea later, to this process of change. And one of the things, the way design has been redefined, and this school probably is also like trying to understand what this means, but design as experience design, right? So we talk about design as experience design, user experience design, user-centered design. There are different ways in which we are redefining this idea. This is one. Another one is design as making. So the maker movement and the do it yourself, and then personal fabrication. There's also this idea of design as making. And then design as ethnography. So we're also like looking at, and this may be related to design thinking as design, and other ways we're trying to really redefine these concepts. The idea what design actually means, how we practice and teach design. And what I talked about is transformational design. Here I want to give a little of context where I'm coming from when I'm talking like this. I'm coming from a program at MIT called Design and Computation. And we, in a way, look at the design process and develop tools and methods for designers. And we have a very critical stance to the way things are. So we usually don't take how things are, but actually look at the way they are and like propose things related to them. And my proposition is called Transformational, and that's what I'm going to present today. The subtitle has been changing a lot, so it will keep changing through the presentation, and I hope to your feedback. But it's basically a model which I call operational because it's to be used. It's not just to model and explain, it's to be used. And I'm going to use this project as a reference throughout the presentation. This is a project I built for the 150th anniversary of MIT in the lobby, if you have been there, in lobby 10, next to lobby 10, next to the Infinite Corridor. And at that time, I'm still really liked analog electronics, so all this is fully analog. There's no microcontroller, it's operational amplifier only. And it has these magnets and a sensor in the back that I built, and people will somehow interact, or I would say now experience. And at that time I remember like people will ask me about this installation, like, so what is this? I call it Maxwell's Dream, that was the name. But people will like still not be comfortable with, okay, so what is this? And I will finally say, okay, it's art. And then, okay, it's an art installation, so there's no problem, like, there's no problem about this. But yes, this was 2 years ago, and after I finished this project, I started doing the research that I'm going to show you today. And I'm going to use my own design process from the origin of this project until it was engaged with the people as a way to relate the whole presentation. And I'm going to use this model that for now looks very complicated, but I'm going to explain it into detail. For now, just for you to know, there's the materials here, some sort of arrows representing the experience, and the designer and the other person. And I'm going to go into details. And I'm going to show the model in relationship to the work that I've done teaching workshops. I've done a lot of workshops. This is part of the research in which I try out this model and through a particular game, which I call it a game instead of calling it a method, but it's a model and a method played as a game. And the first part of the presentation is related to the notion of experience design, which I think is great that somehow designers are getting interested in experience, but I think they don't really know yet how to actually talk about it and really engage in the processes with this difficult sort of concept. And experience design mostly, I would say, seeks these sort of interfaces and like experiencing the screen. And the main problem that I see, this is me, to experience design the way it has been developed, is that they actually, the designers don't have the vocabulary they can use. So they ended up not really actually designing with experience as their design subject. I talk like this design subject because it's in the interest of the designer to work with this. It's not really designing an experience directly. It's a tricky distinction. And in my model, I start really taking this concept seriously and trying to explain. I feel bad of the people there. Hello. What is experience? And I'm going to give you now some sort of a description. But for me, experience involves the material world, which usually we tend to talk a lot. the person and some sort of contact that happens. And I will come back to this question again. This is, again, another image of my project, and asking the question that people ask me at that moment, what is this? And I will come back to this question throughout the presentation. So what are things? This is, I told you that I'm developing this vocabulary as a response to talk about experience. And I'm going to do a little exercise with you if you want. No, you have to do it. It's an obligation. So I want you to pick up your hands like this and like cross your fingers, okay, all of you. And then I want you to do this, but close your eyes. Move your arm. Close your eyes. Move your arm slowly. And then get closer to here. And then with the two fingers, and please take a moment and pay attention. Try not to think. And just pay attention how that feels. How that feels. Like move your fingers up and down. Some people are laughing already. Okay, so the idea is that you were doing something. Okay? And the way I describe doing is involves the senses, but also you were moving. You were moving your arm and touching involves movement. And some of you may also have started thinking about how ridiculous this is, and maybe you start laughing. And this thing that we do feels in a particular way. So in order to be there, you are actually feeling it. This is related to the idea of awareness. So you can be aware of both the sensory sensations, which are the actual, you're touching, so you feel that. And the emotional ones that I distinguish from the idea of emotions. I talk about emotional sensations, which are, for me, felt emotions, because emotions are the names we give to what we actually feel, which, for example, in some of you, after thinking, you thought this was kind of ridiculous or whatever, and you laughed. So something happened to your body, and you felt that too. And then we may distinguish the material. So you may have distinguished the nose. Or in my case, when I do this, I feel two noses. I don't know if anybody was able to feel that. So the world that we live appears to us through what we do, feeling what we do, and the materials appear through that. And the material world, the way we actually talked about it, are labels. So we recognize the world through labels, names. So at a moment when you were a baby and you started touching here, your mom told you nose. To me, it will tell you nariz. And then yes, nariz. But I had to touch it and move with it and then recognize it with this label. And my vocabulary it goes into detail to all this concept, but I want to emphasize that my vocabulary doesn't have definitions, are only evocations. So it's for you. That's why I do this exercise to try to explain it, because you have to feel it directly. It's not like there are no definitions of how things are. These are also words. I mean, so this is the vocabulary, and I'm not gonna go into details. These are all evocations. But if you are interested, I can share it with you. I also have half of that is not here. I have some sort of collective principles of the vocabulary. So all these ideas you talk when you talk about other people. So they become a little different when I talk about my emotion or I talk about the emotion of another person. So very basically, I offer all the vocabulary is only trying to give you this, which is very basic, and people say this is very obvious, and I think it's so obvious that we don't see it. That we can talk about experience, and there may be other ways we can do it, as feeling what we're doing with the materials, where feelings are the sensory and emotional sensations, the doings are our movements, the senses, that in the senses include thinking as a very, not trying to explain what thinking is, but actually how it comes to you experientially. So thoughts come to your mind the same way smells come to your nose. So if you pay attention to your thinking, it just comes. You don't think about thinking. It's like talking. I'm just talking now. I'm not thinking about what I'm going to say. And through that, the materials in my world appear through what I do. But then this becomes what I call a stream of experience. So in the present moment, this is unfolding. And don't worry, this looks very difficult, but mainly I want to say that in the moment I'm doing this, I'm moving here. But then through reflecting on what I've done, I may construct a narrative of what I've done, but it's always retrospective. So the experience is unfolding right here, right now. But then you may think back and say, oh, I moved my hand, I touched my nose. But in the moment where you were doing that, it was just unfolding and happening. So I take this idea of the stream of experience with the concept of the vocabulary, and I start, this is already what I do with the students. Let me get some water. So this is the game. And in the game, I explain them this, and then they create expressions of experience. So I've started developing different ways in which we could express in terms of this vocabulary, but I felt at the end that the best way was through drawing instead of writing. And so we draw what we do. We do these sort of moments, different moments that we construct. We color the feelings. They told me not to mention, I practiced this before, they told me not to mention the Buddhist background of this, but the sensations are either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And the way I'm describing it, so it's the same when people try to describe the sensation, say, this is hot. Hot is a word. So also when you were a baby, maybe you touched something that it was hot. It was unpleasant on the fingers, and your mom told you, that's hot. Okay, and you name that sensation with these concepts. So the way I do it, we just paint the bodies through using 3 colors representing these sensations. So I developed this sort of very rough stories where people constructed this narrative of these different moments. There should not be time. We're not trying to cut time equally, are just moments. Maybe I'll move a little here for these people now. And then after some iteration, this is also iterative, through the work with the people, I developed this thing which I call experience canvas, which allows to have a space enough to paint the bodily sensation, both emotional and sensory, and the body through these different movements and gesture positions. And I paint the material, so I have a way of more organized than the way I showed you before. The materials are in yellow, the material world, so that it goes to the background. The body appears in blacks, the sensations in these 3 colors, and then I also have a way to show the emotional, general emotional sort of response, which sometimes is not directly, for example, like I like going to the sauna, and maybe like my sensory could be very unpleasant, but emotionally I really like it. So there are these different levels. And I've done this work with communities, this workshop, this game. I've done with people in Chile. I'm from Chile. So we have the mountains, and I work with miners, and we have the ocean. It's very nice, you should come visit. And we have the ocean, and we did this with a group of fishermen or a person related to this. And we will go to the way they lived, and we will create these drawings of their experiences, and then we will talk about them. And this is very important to me, and this is the key concept that I talk about transformational design. What is transformation? And I'm very careful with words. Everything have to be, if I'm talking about transformation, so this is, instead of just talking about innovation or just change, what is interesting about the concept of transformation is that it's a change in the conservation of something else. So for example, I really like having dinner with my family, so I will set up the table and rearrange certain things in my house and create certain conditions and transform these particular maybe ways of living so that I can conserve having dinner together at 8 o'clock, whatever. So it's not only change. It's a nice concept, but this also is a concept that I borrow from Maturana, which is he talks about biology in this way. So with the people, and I here like also do design with them, and I want to say here, and I will come back to this later, these communities, this is the first time they were exposed to a PC, personal computer, and we use Arduinos and sensors, something like that with them. But according to these reflections on their experiences and what they want to conserve or change from their way they live. So for example, they rearrange materials, and I will come back later to this, to create, for example, they realized through their drawings that their landscape was full of artificial sort of separations, and they didn't like that. So they created these sort of sensors that will replace the physical fences, that's the word, I think, to some sort of thing that will produce a sound that will make the animals not to cross, or like system like that. Which, I mean, they work in certain ways, but of course they use this very quick way of prototyping. Or in the case of the people that live next to the ocean, they realized that they were, it was interesting because through this exercise they realized that they became aware of the presence of the wind. That they told me that they usually don't see it because they live there. So they decided to create this sensor that, according to the wind, it will turn the wind into intensity of blue light and will position this in different points of the landscape to be able to see it and make it more present in their lives. So they, again, this is a change of something they want to conserve. They want to conserve this connection with the wind, so they created this. These expressions, though, and I again want to be very careful, these are only drawings. Again, they do not replace the experience. These are constructions that they, and I also find this through my research. And they work as evocation. So they evoke an experience, they are not the experience. And the way we talk about, when we share these drawings with each other, the feeling of others, I see it in the light of my own, both emotional and sensory. So if I see somebody crying, that's an expression of experience. And I think today we should be a little more careful the way we talk about emotions, because that's only an expression which I've cried before, so now I can like see because I felt it myself. But that's a little distinction I wanted to make. And this is the slides for this, where again, I told you at the beginning that I felt there was a lack of a vocabulary, and I offer this vocabulary that through this very design process that I show you, I think it can be used by designers in their design processes. But of course, there may be other ways to do it. And second, design as making. Design as making pursues or seeks the automation of design via fabrication. This is like via the technology or personal fabrication. This is a little bit of a caricature, but I was outside reading this Maker magazine, and then you see all these things that people have made, and they tell you how to make them. But that's it. I mean, printing the Eiffel Tower with pressing a button does not really teach you how to make anything that is new. So what I'm saying, my critique to the maker movement is that through learning how to make a thing, you're not really learning how to make anything that is new, because you're only learning how to make something that is already known. So the guy that is explaining you how to make a thing, he made it, and he's telling you how to make it, but that's it. And I had a friend that went to a Maker Fair, and he was surprised because he told me, like, and this is not me, I promise, everybody was just printing Yoda heads and then talking about design, and then there was not much design there, I would say. This is not to say that the 3D printer is bad. I mean, you can use it in very creative ways, but it could be dangerous in certain contexts where you are talking about learning how to design instead of just making a thing. So the way I talk about it, and then I come back to my model, so we started from the experience, right? But I talk about rearranging materials. So we're not really making anything. So we go cut a tree that we find in the world, pick up some stones, put them in particular ways, we rearrange them, we get inside, sleep, get out, and call it a house. Or I like to talk about cooking. Like, would you pick a couple of potatoes, milk from the cow, water from the river, put it together, and then you experience it. So I rearrange some materials, and then I do, and I feel something with these materials. And then I can keep going. And if I don't like the soup, I can find other materials or change the stones of my house. And so the house becomes what it is through what I do with it. You will get tired about this question, I promise. What is this? Anybody knows? Do you recognize? Huh? Yeah, so this was a model that I built, and I told you I was going to show you also my design process, but I'm going to unveil the real process, and I'm going to get almost naked here telling the truth. Sometimes designers don't want to say. So this was, in my proposal for the Maxwell's Dream, we proposed with my friend Kostov what we call at that time an analog projector. This was going to be here in the ceiling, and we were super proud because we wanted to put this magnet with maybe like a couple of motors, and through maybe only 2 motors, create patterns that will be projected here. And with a Kinect, whatever, this was like some years ago, it will control the projection. But what happened when I built this thing? Here it is. So this is the drawings. You can see that at that time I was mostly an architect making drawings. But I built this model, and this is what happened. What happened? But what happened to me? I touched it. It was not supposed to be touched. It was going to be up here. And I touched it and said, oh, this is really nice. Why do I have to put it there? Probably, maybe better this is like, I don't know, do you think it's kind of nice to do it? I never thought about doing that. I mean, it was spontaneous. So through what I did with the same exact materials, so the rearranging part, the making, is not different. The same magnet, the same screws. Through what I did, these materials became something different, completely different. And that's when I'm talking about experience as that things become what they are through what we do. So if I pick up, usually when I present it, there's a bottle. Now there's no bottle. If I take a bottle and I drink with it, it becomes a bottle. But if I hit somebody in the face, it becomes a weapon. And in design, what is interesting is that as part of the process, a new thing begins to appear through what I do with it, and it's spontaneous. I didn't think about it. So what is this? Still a question, but it's becoming. So instead of the making, I said design is moving the body, and that we rearrange the materials in order to do something with those materials so that they appear as what they are. So when I'm making a house, I'm rearranging some materials that then through what I do with these materials, the house appears as a house. And I talk about improvising as a moving which is new, spontaneously new. Like what happened to me when I moved this was spontaneous, was an improvisation, which I didn't thought about and then did it. It just happened in the process. And probably, if you are designers, this has happened to you multiple times. So in the game where I play with the students, I explain this model and look with them at what they do in the design process. Pretty much, especially when you work with, we use these electronic materials, they do it naturally, spontaneously. They put the sensors, they are designing with their movements. They're not just, even now I'm talking, we're not like this, like maybe you are too used to be in the front of the computer, but look at yourself, the way you design, you're probably moving around, talking about what things. And the making, which I don't want to say that it's not important. It's very important to have the tools. If I'm cooking, I want to have a good oven. I want to know how to cut with the knife. I want to have the knife. I want to have all this is for me is the engineering part. which usually we forget. And the only way we teach design is through this, through the rearranging. And I mean, for me, it was fantastic. I was able to learn electronics at MIT and use the machines, and it's great, I'm not saying. But that's not enough. That's what I'm saying. They also engage with their bodies. So now I want to do actual experiment with you. And this is, I'm writing my PhD thesis, and I promise you I'm going to include these results. Okay, how many people we have here? I can use this, like 40, 30 people. So I want you to tell me, what is this? If you know, raise your hand. And just raise your hand if you know what it is. Huh? Nobody? What is this? Huh?
Physical model.
Yeah, physical model. Yes. What is this? Huh? Another sketch. But what is the thing? What is it? When I talk about the house or the, do you know what is this? What is this? People say drawing machine. Okay, people say this. What is this? Huh? Guitar pedals? Okay, I should take notes. What is this? Labyrinth. What is this? Virtual. So these are, what I'm saying now is not what they are. I want to say these are what the people in my workshop designed. Okay? And for me, the great, one of the things important for me that I found on my research is what I call unrecognizables. When you design something new, they become unrecognizable. And I have just proven you that, I guess. When you're designing something, you don't have a name for it, and you make up a name. I was looking today at the projects that you had from last year. Some of were your projects, nice projects. You put a name. I don't know, there was one called something I forgot, but you name it. And I was talking to you at the beginning, all these new things that appear. What is Google? What is iPad? What is Kindle? Blah, 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 blah. I mean, there are names. There are labels. When I told you that when you were a baby, you learn how to call something, the nose, in design, because we're creating something that transforms our experience, we have to name it because we don't recognize it with a known name. And we as designers, we're actually extending our language and our dictionary becomes broader because there are new verbs and new names. I was talking to Paul about bicycle. When you were a kid, in my case, my dad showed me this weird thing, but these materials, this rearrangement of materials, and he told me what to do with it. I experienced it, and he told me, bicicleta, that's a bicycle, you're biking. And then suddenly, I will look around and recognize bicycles. It's similar to when you, before you learn how to read, I don't know if you remember that moment where you will walk in the city and you will see patterns, or when if you go to Japan or to other countries and you don't recognize the signs, once you learn how to read, that's it, they appear. And for me, it's impossible to look at a sign and not read it. I don't know if that's happened to you. So we think the bicycle is a bicycle, but that's only a label that we're learned to recognize our world through these things that appear. So when we design, things are unrecognizable and we name them. So the material here, in design, we feel what we do, but the material we name, and we build up a new name, and it appears. So when I start moving with this thing, it started appearing, and I didn't know what it was, and I had to name it. And so design, you're bringing through moving, bringing forward an experience, and then I don't want to get out the idea of thinking, but for me, thinking, you can still think about intention. So you can decide I want to design for well-being, or you could have intentions, or even an intention that could be very specific as an object. I want to design a bicycle, which I think is tricky. In my workshops, I don't let them use, as part of the rules, you don't use names for things, you just rearrange them and they appear. But then through this spontaneous process of appearance, you can reflect and say, oh, this is not a bicycle. This is a new way, I will call it Segway. This is Segway, a Segway, it's not a bicycle. So you can reflect and think about it, or reflect and think, this is not really working for well-being for me or for others. You can reflect on that. And in the workshops, I've been using this sort of Arduinos and Cersos. I like to call them, instead of input devices, output, the do devices are the field devices. I put it from the point of view of the body. So the speaker is not making a sound. I'm hearing the sound. I press the button. I touch the sensor. So I put it in the other way around. And we use recycled materials. I will recommend, always when I go to design schools, please, let's use recycled materials. There's a lot of cardboard outside the street that we can use. That's why also these objects that you saw were so ugly, which I like. But I also saw this in my workshops, in some of them, where to use the technologies that are available for prototyping, it's very different. You see there, this person is engaging directly with the materials, but here we need to get the Arduino, download, we need a computer, and I also did this with the community and realized that you need to download the software, the drivers, connect it, open it, write code in English, it's not minor, upload it, and then only after that you can move with the material. So it takes you a while, the rearranging is long, and you can move with them. Takes you a while to, it's separated. So I developed a thing I call spaghetti, which is basically replace the Arduino for this. At the beginning, I showed you these different modules with different sensors. This is the same, so it allows you to use 4 type until 8 type of sensor, 8 type of actuators, and then map out the relationship. So I build up this system. So it's very basic. It's work as like you can map out how much you want to pass through like a distance sensor. For example, this is the distance sensor. I only want to measure this, so I can cut up the signal to take up that part. And then I only want to move the motor like this, so I can define the ranges for both directly by hand and without the computer. So it's there, it's direct. So I don't need the computer, I don't need words, I don't need numbers. It's purely direct. I touch it and I see it right away. I also like the idea that is spaghetti kind of looking like. So it's not, there are a lot of things out there that are building blocks, like Lego blocks, like the little bits, things like you connect and you create these trains that are like, this is free and you can put it anywhere. And I went to a very difficult place to work with this, to a community of blind, a school for the blind in Chile, that was actually also in a little town. So it's a little town, like similar to the town I showed you with the other people, but then also a school for the blind. And we went through this same process, and they designed, for example, a glove. I'm going to use a name now, but with which they could feel, they translated the distance to the intensity of vibration, and they could feel the distance to the space and walk around. But the interesting thing for me is that they designing for themselves. So I'm not giving you, the maker here is not giving them how to do it. They give them the materials and they rearrange them. So they also rearrange the materials and wear them directly, always moving their bodies too. And they try things out, they move their bodies with them. So these things appear through moving. And one of the problems that we have today that everything is so visual that it's actually hard to show a project that is felt in their right? So design, I think design is bringing forth the new through moving the body. This is the last part, don't worry, I'm gonna finish. Design as ethnography. So for me, the design ethnography pursues what I talk about, the matching. Matching the user's need with what the client's products are offering. And for me, the problem here, and it's related to the two previous ones, is that designers, through this approach, they do not actually see that they are part of the process, that they are transforming their own experience also, and the experience of others. Because they're trying to capture as if the experience was an object that I could like look, analyze, and take, and put into like some sort of analysis, and that then I can specify through my design what other people are going to experience. And I told you I want to show you my process. This has become interesting now to me because then this is becoming collective. So what happens when I give these things that I rearrange to somebody else? Now, I can observe. That's all I can do. And the interesting thing, I'm asking you again, what is this? And then I also, again, this is my architect background coming to me and making me feel weird now because I will leave this in day and go, and I will come out in the morning, I will find this. So the MIT students will spend all night, they realize they could force these magnets, and instead of make them move like this, they start stacking them, you see? They start stacking, I was like horrified. Oh no, they did this and I will fix it. Every day I will come like furious and I will fix it. And then this was great for the MIT students because I think they created some sort of game and they will try to stack as much as they could. And every day they will do this. And then I realized, oh, this is, again, this was transformed again through what they did. So this was not the thing that will repel, was a game for them to stack this thing up. So that even this, through the people, this changed another time. Also, I always thought about this as a screen that they will look at. I thought about this almost like I call it Maxwell's dream painting with light. I thought this was going to be almost like a canvas for painting. But people were there, they would sit in front of this and look at it. And I would say, what are you doing? No, it's very nice to look at. At the back, they will get a drink. And I will, what are you doing? The thing is there. No, it's really nice, the light, and we are enjoying ourselves here. And as a designer, I can see this as a limitation of, oh, I didn't do it right because they are not doing what I thought they should do. But I see this most as an opportunity, and always tell this, and this is very hard to take for designers. I say that design is never finished, and if we look at design as an open-ended process where we give things to one another and learn from what other people do, this is not a problem. Actually, it's the way we have been transforming through time. If we were able to specify the experience of others, that's the end of humanity. In the way we know it, we will be like the little bird doing the same nest over and over again because we already know how to specify and we live like that. But we are not like that. We want to experience new things and try new type of foods. I like Peruvian food, and I cannot explain Peruvian food or any type of other food if I don't understand that this is a process of transformation that is going to keep changing. So in my work, in the game, what we do, we play roles. So we play as users, slash clients, whatever you want to call them, and designers of one another, and we don't communicate with words. So the only way we communicate is that as a client, if I want something, the other to design for me, I will make a drawing of my experience using this canvas that I showed you at the beginning. As designer, I will get this strange drawing of our experience, which for me is not very different to say I want a house. I mean, if I use a word, whatever that architect knows about the house, and this is, if you ever have worked with an architect or been an architect, you will know that the architect will never give you back what you wanted. I mean, and if you give it back what you wanted, probably you wouldn't like it. So the designer gets this, and this is hard for me also to explain to students. So it's not that they need to use this as a way to really make this experience as if it was an object. It's an initial expression they use as part of their design intentions. But then, of course, they have their own experience. They have the materials that they like to use. I mean, I'm a designer, I like to use wood. I will design, I like to use wood, whatever. And I only have 1 week to make something. So even though it's open-ended, we have times and we have materials that we need to use sometime, right? So I will rearrange them, they will rearrange them, and then after we liked the soup that we put together, we invite somebody for dinner, and that person comes and try our soup without me telling him what it was. I just came back from Colombia. Anybody from Colombia here? Yeah, so they have this soup called sancocho, and they will be the sancocho. That's a name. I don't know what sancocho is. I mean, I have to try it, right? And now I know what sancocho, probably the rest of people don't know what it is. So it's the same in design. You give this person come, even if they told me that's a sancocho, I don't know. It's a sancocho. Now I understand it because I've tried. And then the designer observes. I told you I will repeat this question again. What is this? So you get these weird things, right? The unrecognizables that I showed you before. And the game ends in one iteration because we iterate multiple times where the user, so I will review this again. The user will create this drawing, will give it to the designer. The designer will go to another room. They will not talk to each other. We'll make up something, we give it back, and the client will get this weird stuff. And what is this? So this is what happens. So here's the user receiving back this rearranged object, materials. And they don't tell each other what they are or what to do with them. And then the designer will show his design intentions, but without talking. Through moving, again, moving the body here is key. And what is interesting to me is that these things do not have to match. If they will match, it's actually boring. Some of these examples actually match. And you know what happened when they matched? When you want a house that you know what you want and the architect goes and works for a week and give you what you wanted, you probably will be, really, I could have designed this. Come on, be more creative. So even though we think that we want to specify each other, we actually want to be surprised. We want to be transformed. We want to learn something from the other person. And this works both ways. As a user, I want to find something unrecognizable. A new dish, I go to a restaurant and try it. Oh, this is really interesting. I was not expecting it. But also as a designer, if we break up and open up the process, we will find that we can learn. So the mismatch is interesting here because by observing one another, we can learn from one another. And this is not, it's not that the designer is wrong, it's not that the user or the client is wrong, it's actually both are creative and are actually part of an open-ended process of exchange, which is part of a culture, of course, which we actually learn from one another. So I say that design is not about matching experience, it's actually the other way around, is mismatch. And the key concept here is coordination. So when you were a baby again, and your mother showed you the yellow toy and told you, yellow, 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 or amarillo in Spanish, and then she told you, let's meet in the yellow door, and you meet there, you coordinated your experience. But that doesn't mean that that the yellow is something that is, yellow is a word. So even though we mismatch our experiences then, and that's not a problem, we can coordinate our experience through naming the things that we bring So I like to give this example, but what is Steve Jobs doing when the first day he did go and show the new materials that he and the team rearranged? He's showing what to do with them. He's demonstrating the same way this happens. And by calling the materials iPad or iPhone or whatever, you can then coordinate and like, Mom, give me the iPod. And she will give you the iPod. So we coordinate, we mismatch experience and we coordinate our experiences, which is totally fine. And so we transform and coordinate. So I say that design is transformation through mismatching experiences and not actually matching, if we look at the process as a process which is open-ended and does not finish when you give something to somebody else. So, okay, it's gonna end soon, don't worry. So coming back to the first question, the problem even that I like to talk about, and Paul was introducing this at the beginning, that I'm not against technology. I mean, I'm teaching electronics and we're developing things, but I feel that we are in this very amazing moment, but at the same time, it's a key moment. I think people are realizing it. And we are transforming so fast and without reflection. So in the story of Icarus and Daedalus, Icarus got greedy and tried to reach the sun, and then the wax that was holding they melted, and I don't want to be so negative, but we are in this moment where we can, I feel this is very important, start really, if we are interested in experience, let's do it, and look at how we are transforming our experiences and be reflective about it. And that doesn't mean we're not going to keep changing. Actually, all my work is about creating new things, but then be able to see experientially how these things may or not may be affecting our lives. And we have these new devices today, these things that we touch and communicate. And this is really you are really started realizing in your projects from last year also. So somebody did a box so you can put the phone, and the phone is not connected anymore, so you don't get stressed. There are things that are affecting us emotionally, and we just make things, and we don't take a moment to reflect. And to reflect, we need to really have the vocabulary to be able to talk about the experience and its transformation. And that it was mainly my main goal behind all this work, is basically about that. So I told you, I give you this vocabulary that I think it's one vocabulary that designers can use. It's not descriptions, are not definitions, it's evocations that we can like look at them through an awareness. But design is feeling what we're doing with materials. This is not just also like a nice explanation. Also for designers, we learn that we name the materials when we bring about something new. And that we bring about this new experience through moving and not too much through making. So it's good to learn the technical, and it's good to learn how to cut with a knife and how to use the 3D printing and the laser cutter. But then I say that's not enough. You can replicate some Yoda head, but that's what you can do. And then that we should really open up the process and understand that the people that we are designing for, they're not just there, they really are creative as well. I want to show you this part, so it's over, but this is the end of the story of my Maxwell's dream. And this is the last time I'm going to ask you this. What is this? Anybody knows?
Yeah.
But do you recognize it if you look at it? Yes. So you got it. So we coordinate our experience. Why I told you that we transform and coordinate. So this is very interesting to me. After a year and a half or more, I got this. Somebody knocked on my door in my office at MIT. They brought me this weird thing. They brought me this. Some students that they were there in my installation, they liked it, and after 2 years, they wanted to build it up again, which for me was like, this is amazing. And I want to show you a video of their final presentation where they present this thing they rearrange. And and you have to trust me here This is not a setup. This is what happened. And you will see, because of the video is not very good, you will believe me. This is what they said.
The magnets are interacting with each other, obviously, to cause the other ones to move. But what's causing it to light up is a iron reflectance sensor right behind the lever. That's why the tape is there, to reflect back and cause the sensor to...
What is it called?
Reflectance sensor?
Oh, the actual display.
Oh, Maxwell's dream. And, oh, should I have said that? Like, Maxwell's dream at the beginning.
So remember at the beginning, people were asking me what this thing I designed was, and I didn't know, and I said, this is an art installation. But I called it Maxwell's Dream, I named it. And these people came to this installation, and after experiencing this, they learned this name, and this thing appeared, and we coordinated our experience around it. And you said there, I showed you what is it, and said a Maxwell's Dream, and it became a Maxwell's Dream. So if at the moment when they asked me, and I said a Maxwell's Dream, they said, what is this? An art installation. But now the Maxwell's Dream appeared as a thing with a name, because we have coordinated our experience around what to do and feel with this type of rearranged materials. And now we can go to the question. Thank you.
I didn't realize all that making wasn't really making. It was actually doing.
Moving. Yeah.
Is that a subset of doing?
Yes.
But why is it only moving? Why is it not all doing?
No, I mean, through moving, you are touching, sensing.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of the same. You're also thinking. It's all a doing. But then the way you can look at it when you observe, it becomes some movement. Yeah.
So it's the moving movement, not the maker movement.
Yeah. I mean, you still have to rearrange materials. I call it rearrange materials. And then once you move with them, they appear as what they are. And you can say, I'm designing this Maxwell's Dream. Yeah.
In addition to a vocabulary, I feel like I need an epistemological guide to the shifts that have to occur in order to really understand the depth, because you're very elegantly redefining certain things, but also putting them into the doing and into the practice. I wanted to ask one clarification. When you start with any group in the workshop, you simply place the materials in front of them?
Yes. So the thing is that I teach them also, actually this is kind of the way I get to do these workshops. They don't pay me to do this, they pay me to teach them Arduinos. And I give them, like, in Spanish we say we score them a goal without even, a soccer goal without even them asking for it. So I teach them to rearrange the sensors and the actuators. So I give them certain materials that they rearranged. And we also have there a series of recycled materials, cardboard, like bottles, fabric. And that's kind of their kitchen, their pepper and their milk or whatever to rearrange.
So after you explain the materials, then you say, now do something with them?
That's the tricky part. Yeah. So I tell them to explore what they do and feel with these materials, and what they could do and feel with these materials. And that's what I said.
Good.
But I realized that the people, what is interesting to me is that this process works much better not in design schools, because in design schools they learn so many other methods, so they start doing analysis or like, let's think, and they make drawings. For example, with the communities and the blind, they didn't have any problem. They will start rearranging the materials right away. We also have to say, don't make a 3D model, please. So 3D modeling, for example, I don't allow it in this game has certain rules, so they cannot use 3D modeling. So I want them to engage directly with the materials as faster as they can. But I realized that still they define these design intentions. So then I give a space for them to do so, but then, and that's what I talk about in my thesis too, then those design intentions disappear. So those design intentions allow you to start. I'm going to design a bicycle, whatever. But then you start rearranging these materials, and then you find something different.
Can you bring the model up for a moment?
Yeah. I don't know where it is.
So you've answered one question, which for most of it I wasn't sure, in that don't tell them what to make.
Yeah.
You tell them how the pieces fit together, because that's why you're paid, because they're learning Arduino. And in this right-hand circle,
Yes.
they're experimenting with the materials, if experimenting is an okay word. They're creating an experience. D is for designer, and they continue this rearrangement process.
Yes.
And then at some point,
Yes.
they've accumulated something which is somehow coherent or whole or not complete, but
So you're cooking and suddenly you say, I like this soup, I
Great.
want to give it to somebody else.
good. And that's, show the arrow where that happens.
Yeah, so they give it to somebody else.
And what happens in this loop then?
Then that person comes and tries the soup. And you can observe whether they eat it all, whether
So who's the you in that sentence?
the other person.
The other, well, the other person's observing themselves, but the designer is observing
The other person.
the other person, and drawing what goes on in the designer's mind as a consequence of watching.
So for me, the important part of this model is that the designer is a key. So he's observing, and sometimes, even though we observe, we don't put ourselves there. So the designer, if he looks at somebody smiling, the thing I was saying at the beginning, he will like understand the feeling of other in the light of his own. But also through observing, and this happens all the time in design, not only when you talk about the user, but for example, like I will design something, show it to my professor, I will hate my design. Really, I feel this is horrible design. And my professor will look at it, no, but look, this is very cool. You can, and you're like, yeah, this is good. Probably to all of you, this has happened. The materials are exactly the same. They have not changed.
I'd like to start with questions about the diagram, and then not restricted to that. But
Just a quick question. So you said when you hand it to another designer,
Yeah.
that I'll use the word failure. Maybe it's not failure, but boring, because they use it exactly how you
Yes.
intended,
Yes.
versus that's how you were like, bummer,
Yeah, yeah.
versus, oh,
Yeah.
cool, okay.
Yeah, it happened. Like, for example, one group, when you design something that is recognizable, for example, one group will design with this thing. This happens to me usually with engineers. I'm sorry, but one will design a bag with an alarm that you can open and make sound. You will give it, you will see, and I have this in my thesis. The person that will come back and see this will be right away like, really? Like, yeah, of course. And it will be a little bit uncomfortable actually, because there's nothing real. You're not really learning, and also the user, whatever you want to call it, will not really be contributing. So he feels like he doesn't have to even be there showing this, because
again, the richness is
in the mismatch. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying very much. And I have a question, I guess,
Yes.
inquisitive or just a curiosity. And then also something I'd like to share, because actually many of us sitting in the front row here, we design a lot for children. And this is a very interesting model, I think, that we can recognize very well, because our user over here, one, cannot very often express the design intent of what they're looking for.
Yeah.
And two, are experts at mismatching. So in this process, whenever we do something and arrange materials and do that and pass it back, we will almost always get a very natural, open, unfiltered reuse, or whatever you would call that here, right? Experience of what we've made.
Yes.
And I think we really live on that. We live on that mismatch.
Yeah.
And you're very right. I mean, if they use it exactly the way we thought, we're kind of like, well, then we didn't really think hard enough. Yeah. So I guess a few things. I'm wondering if you've ever had the chance. I appreciate the very much getting out of the design world and working with the blind or the Fisher people who don't, whatever, think in models or think of designing something. But have you had a chance to work with children at all?
I work with children, not so young as I would like, and like 14 years old. It's not. I would like maybe, I don't know what age do you work?
Well, we work from everything from two basically and up. Yeah.
Yeah, I will imagine that this is related. That's why also children are so creative, because they're opening to learn and they don't know many words, so they keep improvising with the materials that they get. Right. For us, we get something and we do what we know what to do with that thing right away, because we have learned it and we are fixed. So with this, I've done this with, and the way I've done it is we also design games with them. So they design these games that they want to play for themselves and for their peers. And yeah, it happens, but I think they're a little bit too old. So I will really maybe would like to explore how this will work with younger people. But thanks for the comment.
Hey, so I'm wondering kind of what the barrier to entry or just maybe incentive is for people to actually start this process. So with your students, it's more they're learning the Arduino and that's why they're going to create these things. So I'm wondering more in Chile, like what are you telling these people to have them start interacting with these things? Because they seem to create things that are maybe more kind of useful for their surroundings. So are you telling them at the beginning, hey, we're gonna come together and like figure out what you guys need so we can build it for you? Or is it more of an experimentation where you're saying, let's see what happens, maybe you'll learn something, maybe you won't? Like what is the incentive that you're giving them?
No, for them I have to be very careful. So for them I don't, because these things are not, they design and they kind of work in a way, but they're not products that you can like then, I mean, these are like, so the way I frame it for them is mostly like a learning experience about understanding what it means to be a designer and to empower them to, for me, like the big realization that these people had, and I think at the end of the day that's much more important than everything I said, is that they first of all understand most technologies that they have. I mean, all technologies at the end of the day have this little computer inside the smartphone, and they have sensors, and the phone, they has a light and vibrates, they have the effectors, so they learn the electronics, and they learn that they could design their own. For them, this is big thing, because they are in these communities far away, where they don't even have access to a computer or whatever, and then they learn. For them, before doing this, no, this is only something that people in the United States can do. We cannot, we're not, and these people are people that don't have higher education either. So they haven't gone through it.
So it's maybe a matter of like giving them a little power as well.
They empower
like they
them
have power over these
to
things
realize
that
that they could do things, and that they could do things for themselves. And this is part of a bigger program that I'm involved with, where I'm trying to develop design and like innovation for the communities. So the way I took it for me is to empower them, so that then when they talk with other people, they know what is a sensor, they know this, and they understand that they don't have to be scared about like technologies or whatever, that they could like really be empowered. That's the way I frame it. Yeah.
What problem were you trying to solve, Danielle, when you developed this model?
Oof. I'm gonna tell you, I could do another loop here, because this is also a Maxwell's dream. I mean, that's why I want to hear from you, because I'm doing these things, and I'm doing it with people, and then I do it them again, and I'm like bringing this spontaneously.
So we're over here?
All this, and me today, I'm also a material for you, are here.
Oh, we are the materials.
No, all this light here, and me too. You are here, and you are listening to me, and like I'm observing you too.
But you didn't answer the question. What problem?
So I don't have any problem. I'm not solving a problem.
He has no problem.
No. Yeah.
That's a good situation to be in. No, I really like what you were talking about, designing these unrecognizables, or like, now I'm like making that into a word, but when in this process, like two things, like when in this process is the right moment to give something a name, like start labeling, because you said something interesting. It's like in the beginning you're like saying don't give it names, don't refer to it. So leave that out. I think that's really interesting process. And the second one is like who's to give that name? Because in the Maxwell stream you were the one giving it, right? Because if you hadn't given it, maybe it's been a bit like the atrium thingy that moves, or like whatever, like atrium machine. Maybe that would have been the name, right? So like when to give the name and who's to give it?
So for when, I've done on my thesis also, what I realized that this is a gradual process. And even some of you, when you talk about the name of these materials, you talk about them by making up the machine, the drawing machine. So people at the beginning, they will make up these pre-names, which are evocations of the experience. So they will say, the glove with which we could touch the wall from a distance. And that will be then kind of like a pre-name, big name, which actually is an evocation of what they actually is, an evocation of the experience. So there's no right moment per se. Throughout the process, you keep renaming with bigger or smaller name, and at the end you say the eye globe, whatever, and you give it a name. Regarding the other thing, I will say that everybody can name whatever they want, but then of course when I'm presenting something, I can say this is a sancocho, and I will tell you, you will ask me what is this, and as a designer, I will tell you the name that I put it with, and like people do that. I mean, you launch the new iPhone and say this is an iPhone 6. People, when you talk about this, call it iPhone 6. So then you can coordinate your experience around that name. But that doesn't mean that the name could not be different. And we do it, we kind of, but the designer actively, and I will say, without even realizing it, I think people don't realize that they give it name and then they tell others, like, look, I did this. I make, that's why the making of a thing is tricky, because we need to talk about things in that way. We use these words. So then you will ask a designer, what are you making? No, I'm making a blah, blah, blah. I'm making this thing, right? You give it a name because you need to be able to talk about it. But the pre-naming thing I thought was very interesting because usually, and people say the machine for drawing, they will make up longer sort of descriptions or evocations for the actual experience. And then they will kind of maybe shorten it and call it like at the end, maybe when they have to give a presentation and they have to put it into a slide, they will put it like the da-da-da, whatever. Yeah.
Hi. I kind of understand that it's a pretty interesting way of making people, users, to kind of play around with material and see how they actually, use materials differently to have a newer thing or something which previously they haven't related to. I'm very curious to know how is it that you create your kit? I mean, what are the thoughts that go into creating a kit that you actually take around and use for your experiments?
For the materials?
The materials that you use.
So the material I thought about, well, I really like electronics, and I was designing this thing with electronics before. So I thought, I mean, you could think about other type of materials, even like food, for the same sort of process. But in my case, I like the electronics, I use electronics. And also I get paid because I use electronics. But in my case, I look for sensors and effectors that are pretty, that involve a movement. And I now reflect, at the moment, maybe I didn't do so. So I use a pressure sensor that you press, an accelerometer where you move, the distance sensor where you...
So you basically don't have any particular thought in like picking up maybe 2 pressure sensors and 1 proximity sensor and maybe a belt and maybe some pieces of cardboard.
So then I give them this sort of set of different materials that they have in their kitchen, and then they know that the pepper is like spicy, and because I show them, and then they start rearranging these materials. Yes, but then once I realized the Arduino thing was, for me, actually this is very instrumental, I have to be honest. Like what happened to me is that Arduino took really long time. And for people like, it's kind of you need a computer, connect, it takes a while. When you're cutting cardboard and putting some masking tape, you're like right away moving and doing things. So the spaghetti idea was to kind of try to get closer to that where you could put it around directly and connect the sensors, and we don't have to connect the computer and then map it out directly and be able to change it as directly as possible. Of course, it's much more limited to what you can do with an Arduino. I mean, Arduino, you can do much more of the things.
So basically what I was trying to come to is that as designers, even as people and more so as designers, we have a certain preconceived thoughts about how certain things can be used, how can be used. So we tend to, I mean, our decisions for in this respect, making the kit are kind of biased, you know, like probably if I use a cardboard and I give a belt, maybe, and put some sensors, people will make something which would hang, for example. You know, if I give a belt, I can just put it inside and hang it. So, I mean, do you like kind of get those moments and get
For example,
past?
yeah, in my case, I never thought people would do mostly wearables.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't expect it. I mean, I'm an architect, so like, I thought they would do, and like, I don't know, because these things you touch, whatever, they will put them around and it will be most, so it was also like us, in that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. So you have an architectural background.
Very far away, but yes.
Me too, and I'm actually, that's why I'm asking this. Because I had the opportunity to work as a professor. And usually in architecture school, you would ask, or they would ask you to develop a process as a design intention.
Yes.
And then, for example, you would be explaining your project.
Yes.
And then you would, thank you. You would you would have a cylinder shape building.
Yes.
And then when you would be explaining that project as a student, for example, you would be saying, I have to present you the perfect prism.
Yeah.
Right? And then you know that, of course, you don't realize that you're explaining your project incorrectly or as an uninformed mismatch.
Yes.
Okay? So the question would be, what do you think the difference between you as an architect and now as a as a designer in a different field is? So what's the difference that you can see in terms of the process of designing an intention just before you get into that process?
I think there's no difference to me in design or cooking or anything that we do is the same. That's what I think. But different things what the architect thinks they do. Okay, so I was the other way, sometimes I invited to some reviews. And like this was the student that got a brief from the professor to do a project with the list, with everything. And the student did exactly what the professor asked. It was an amazing project according to the brief. But the professor was not surprised. What is this? This is, he called it, this is too professional. This project is exactly, I mean, so you could have initial design intentions. And I think that's why sometimes I don't like about architecture education, that they don't see what is actually happening in the process, which is amazing actually, but they don't see it. The way I look at it, I see this is great. You are like bringing out something to the professor, and he's looking at it, telling you what to do next. But the design intentions for me as the student is like Pollock used to put some paint on the sponge and throw it on the wall, and then he looks at the wall. So you can have initial design intentions, but then through the process, and we're not honest. You create a story at the end, very rational, why your project is like this, and you're not telling the truth. You didn't really think about this when you started. Let's be honest.
It's true.
But it's true. Like you will say, I'm going to do this at the beginning, and you have all this, and you will define intentions, which will be the sponge for you to start painting. But once you start picking up things and put them there, suddenly maybe you will look at it horizontally, say like, oh, this is, and then you will say, no, let's do a cylinder. And you will make up an explanation because the sun moves like this, and architects love these explanations about the efficiency and green buildings, and this is much more sustainable. Come on, you do the curve because you like the curve. Don't tell me that you did the curve because it's more efficient.
Yes, it's just a quick question. So you were mentioning that whenever you were doing the experiment down in Chile, you had a different results because you just mentioned that they just started to do it right away.
Yes.
Do you think that that might be related to the art of seeing by Huxley? The more you see, the more you know, or the more you know, the more you see.
I don't know about that quotation. For me, it's very simple. With designers, they know too much about design, so I had to make them unlearn what they know. With the people that don't know design, it's like the little children. They just go and start playing around. But designers, no, we need to find an intention. We need to think something smart. And we need to analyze the user's needs and go do interviews or something. I don't want to offend anybody, and that's fine to do. You can define these design intentions and then reflect at the end to what your design intentions were.
So one problem that this solves is that it unlearns designers.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. How long have you been working on Maxwell Stream?
How much I work?
How long have you been working on that project?
I mean, it's still there, kind of.
When did you start? How long ago?
Maybe 3 years, 4 years ago.
3 years ago. And this process is kind of a result of that project.
Was an initial sort of.
It was born from that project. I appreciate the process very much. My question is, how do you know when you're done? Like, what are the, are there any filters to tell you?
In that case, I had a deadline. There was the 150th anniversary of MIT,
yes.
And people will come that day to see what I have to do.
Right. But you're still iterating. I mean, you
put it there. Actually, when I should include that part too. When I put it there, so this is more like electronic problem, but I will always look at this individually and they work perfect. But when I put them all together, they start coupling. I don't know if you know that the cables, so this starts making sounds. Like you will move them and then I thought about that. It could have been actually cool. When I was installing it, right in like 20 minutes before people will come. But I was like, no, this is not right. And I picked some guy from the Media Lab that I know. He's like the great guy in electrical engineering. And he like, no, you need to put additional, like we put some capacitors in the back, whatever, and the sound went away. But then looking back, I think they were making sound when you move them. And it was an annoying sound, but still. So I think, for me, this is an open-ended process. And and people I like to talk about cooking because people have experienced it. When you like something that you have made, even if you can make it like maybe better, whether you wanna maybe show it to somebody. Hey, look, try this. When you touch this thing and say, oh, this is cool, I show it to somebody. Look, do you think we should maybe do this instead of putting it there? Yeah, it's kind of cool. That's when you know. And and also when you run out of time. So it's open-ended process, and you have to deliver, and you just give it, and then that's what it is. So it's never finished.
Right. Just again, what was the original intent of that project?
It was like a thing that, like a kind of like a thing you will hang, like we call it an analog projector, that will have all these little. They will be smaller with magnets. And then we will project from behind. And then like people will stand in front of the wall. And according to the way they will be moving, the patterns will follow the movements. But you will never touch it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Because it seems so natural when you look at it. Why wouldn't you touch that? But,
but I mean, like that's the thing, when you look at it, I was all the time, when I was rearranging it, I was doing that analog projector. I never thought about touching it. It's not intentional. The intention was not before. Spontaneity is very important word. It became a spontaneous process.
We had a project that actually Gabby was working on, that we had designed it, or she had designed it so that it was two people. Two kids were supposed to sit back to back, and they were going to go back and forth. They're going to push, they're going to push. We brought in a bunch of kids, and they piled on the thing. And I'm like, wait, it's broken. It's not working. I'm like, no, wait, it's not broken. They're doing exactly what they should be doing, which is just learning and growing. It was really cool. But it was a very big surprise. We were like, wow, this is great.
For example, a word that I avoid a lot is interpretation. And this is the Maturana. So the people are not interpreting what you made in a different way. They are bringing forward what they do, this thing appears to them. And it's not that they are interpreting so I'm an architect and I design a house with a living room, and I can write on the floor plan living room, and then I rearrange these materials and the person comes there and put a bed there and sleeps there. She's not interpreting my living room as a bedroom. She's just living the bedroom. Who's going to tell that? I mean, if she likes...
As a designer, how would you feel? If as a designer,
your motivation is to specify the experience of another person, then when you see that, you may say to yourself, I'm a bad designer. But if you are not like that, and for you, you're kind of even like the idea that she did whatever she wanted, you could say, I'm a good designer. So it's a commentary. It's not an absolute value. It cannot be an absolute value.
I was more looking at from the perspective of, like, it was an observation that somebody had, and you kind of design or you kind of work around that observation, and it is a reflection of your observation.
Yes.
But your observation, how it is perceived by the other person. Of course, when I say good design, I don't mean if somebody puts their bed, it's a bad design. It's probably broadening the scope of your design. So what is your opinion on that?
For me, that's what I'm saying. It's not an absolute value. And I could be very upset. People came and they did this with my design. So I'm a very bad designer because I didn't design it well, so they could not. But somebody else can come to me, and I really believe I'm a bad designer. I believe it. But somebody else can come and say, look, but this is actually really cool. They are playing around with this. And I will say, really? I'm a very good designer.
I think in the same way that you've shifted from making to moving, you're shifting our imagination of what designer means. It's not, I made this, I want you to have what I made. It's, I offer this, what do you want? Or some articulation like that, which you do much more eloquently here. And I think that shift might be the nice moment to say that our design of this moment will now shift to some drinks. We hope you'll join us, and hope you'll thank Danielle for a wonderful presentation.
Thanks for coming. So the world that we live appears to us through what we do, feeling what we do, and the materials appear through that. And the material world, the way we actually talked about it, are labels. So we recognize the world through labels, names. So at a moment when you were a baby and you started touching here, your mom told you nose. To me, it will tell you nariz. And then yes, nariz. But I had to touch it and move with it and then recognize it with this label. And my vocabulary it goes into detail to all this concept, but I want to emphasize that my vocabulary doesn't have definitions, are only evocations. So it's for you. That's why I do this exercise to try to explain it, because you have to feel it directly. It's not like there are not definitions of how things are. These are also words. I mean, so this is the vocabulary, and I'm not gonna go into details. These are all evocations, but if you are interested, I can share it with you. I also have half of that is not here. I have some sort of collective principles of the vocabulary. So all these ideas you talk when you talk about other people. So they become a little different when I talk about my emotion or I talk about the emotion of another person. So very basically, I offer, all the vocabulary is only trying to give you this, which is very basic, and people say this is very obvious, and I think it's so obvious that we don't see it. That we can talk about experience, and there may be other ways we can do it, as feeling what we're doing with the materials, where feelings are the sensory and emotional sensations, the doings are our movements, the senses, that in the senses include thinking as a very, not trying to explain what thinking is, but actually how it comes to you experientially. So thoughts come to your mind the same way smells come to your nose. So if you pay attention to your thinking, it just comes. You don't think about thinking. It's like talking. I'm just talking now. I'm not thinking about what I'm going to say. And through that, the materials in my world appear through what I do. But then this becomes what I call a stream of experience. So in the present moment, this is unfolding. And don't worry, this looks very difficult, but mainly I want to say that in the moment I'm doing this, I'm moving here. But then through reflecting on what I've done, I may construct a narrative of what I've done, but it's always retrospective. So the experience is unfolding right here, right now. But then you may think back and say, oh, I moved my hand, I touched my nose. But in the moment where you were doing that, it was just unfolding and happening. So I take this idea of the stream of experience with the concept of the vocabulary, and I start, this is already what I do with the students. Let me get some water. The way we live more than ever. And I say more than ever because we all know that through design we are continuously changing the way we live, but lately, through these new technologies, where kind of the rate of change is increasing much more. And this is, I promise this is the only boring graph I'm going to show today. I put it at the beginning. But it shows very briefly just to show that it takes so much time to kind of adopt certain technology, but today, and we all know we can experience this in every moment of, even in our daily life, how new things appear, and actually probably you are also like bringing these things to the world, and they are changing the way we live. And this is also, and you know this, I was asking Paul about this school. I mean, this school, I think it's 6 years old. Design also is being redefined, and it's becoming really like, before, I don't know, like 10 years ago, design was maybe related to graphic, industrial, architecture, but today, form making. And today is being redefined, and we are realizing that designers, we have actually like a big responsibility, and I will come back to this idea later, to this process of change. And one of the things, the way design has been redefined, and this school probably is also like trying to understand what this means, but designers experience design, right? So we talk about design as experience design, user experience design, user-centered design. There are different ways in which we are redefining this idea. This is one. Another one is design as making. So the maker movement and the do-it-yourself, and then personal fabrication. There's also this idea of design as making. And then design as ethnography. So we are also like looking at, and this may be related to design thinking as design, and other ways we're trying to really redefine these concepts. The idea what design actually means, how we practice and teach design. And what I talked about is transformational design. And here I want to give a little of context where I'm coming from when I'm talking like this. I'm coming from a program at MIT called Design and Computation. And we, in a way, look at the design process and develop tools and methods for designers. And we have a very critical stance to the way things are. So we usually don't take how things are, but actually look at the way they are and like propose things related to them. And my proposition is called Transformational Design, and that's what I'm going to present today. The subtitle has been changing a lot, so it will keep changing through the presentation, and I hope through your feedback. But it's basically a model which I call operational because it's to be used. It's not just to model and explain, it's to be used. And I'm going to use this project as a reference, throughout the presentation. This is a project I built for the 150th anniversary of MIT in the lobby, if you have been there in lobby 10, next to lobby 10, next to the Infinite Corridor. And at that time, I'm still really liked analog electronics, so all this is fully analog. There's no microcontroller, it's operational amplifier only. And it has these magnets and a sensor in the back that I built, and people will somehow interact, or I would say now experience. And at that time I remember like people will ask me about this installation, like, so what is this? I call it Maxwell's Dream, that was the name. But people will like still not be comfortable with, okay, so what is this? And I will finally say, okay, it's art. And then, okay, it's an art installation, so there's no problem, like, there's no problem about this. But yes, was 2 years ago, and after I finished this project, I started doing the research that I'm gonna show you today. And I'm gonna use my own design process from the origin of this project until it was engaged with the people as a way to relate the whole presentation. And I'm gonna use this model that for now looks very complicated, but I'm gonna explain it into detail. For now, just for you to know, there's the materials here, some sort of arrows representing the experience and the designer and the other person. And I'm gonna go into details. And I'm gonna show the model in relationship to the work that I've done teaching workshops. I've done a lot of workshops. This is part of the research in which I try out this model and through a particular game, which I call it a game instead of calling it a method, but it's a model and a method played as a game. And the first part of the presentation is related to the notion of experience design, which I think is great that somehow designers are getting interested in experience, but I think they don't really know yet how to actually talk about it and really engage in the processes with this difficult sort of concept. And experience design mostly, I would say, seeks these sort of interfaces and like experiencing the screen. And the main problem that I see, this is me, to experience design the way it has been developed, is that they actually, the designers don't have the vocabulary they can use. So they ended up not really actually designing with experience as their design subject. I talk like this design subject because
Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to present Daniel Hosenberg, who's been kind enough to come down from Cambridge to talk to us today about his model of a process of design. I will leave him to give you the important details, but he has a practice in individual and collective designing that I think is quite important. Daniel and I connected through the ideas of cybernetics, I think, and we overlapped at some conferences. And he kindly invited me to speak at a series that he organized at MIT in the PhD program there called Cybernetics and Design. And I'm thrilled to be able to reciprocate on this occasion and have him come to New York.
That was our agreement, no? I invited you because...
I don't remember that part.
It took you like 2 years to invite me back.
I'm slow. It's called slow food, slow code, slow inviting. But we made it. We also had a great time that day, I remember, because Marvin Minsky was supposed to come to my talk and he couldn't. But we roped him into coming to a seminar with you and your colleagues. And Marvin and his wife, Gloria, were wonderful and very open, and we had a really fantastic conversation. And with that in mind, we do want to turn this into a conversation soon. And Danielle will speak for about 40 minutes, and then we'll get into it, and then there's drinks, and we hope some more conviviality in the other room. I'll leave, again, Daniel to speak exactly why he does what he does. I feel that it's important because it's ethical, because he has a point of view on design which is different, or part of this shift away from designing for users to designing with and by users. But he will make the distinction much more subtly than I just have. Most important to me is that he wants designers to be aware of the responsibility of the relationship between designers and designed for, or designed by, or designed with. We call these people users. It's a horrible word. But I think his methodology brings us more toward participants, which could be one of a better word. And with that, I'll leave Danielle to explain. Thank you.
I was wondering if like people come maybe the man come closer.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's a great idea. We should come in.
So first of all, I'm very happy to be here, also in this great city. I really like New York, and thanks, Paul, for inviting me today, even though it took him a while. So I like to start with this image, which is, I don't know if you recognize it, but it's an image from this story about the great inventor Daedalus creating these wings for Icarus, to somehow illustrate the great moment that we're living today, where we have this amazing moment for us, where new interactive technologies are kind of changing. It's in the interest of the designer to work with this. It's not really designing an experience directly. It's a tricky distinction. And in my model, I start really taking this concept seriously and trying to explain. I feel bad at the people there. Hello. What is experience? And I'm going to give you now some sort of a description. But for me, experience involves the material world, which usually we tend to talk a lot, the person, and some sort of contact that happens. And I will come back to this question again. This is, again, another image of my project, and asking the question that people ask me at that moment, what is this? And I will come back to this question throughout the presentation. So what are things? This is, I told you that I'm developing this vocabulary as a response to talk about experience. And I'm going to do a little exercise with you if you want. No, you have to do it. It's an obligation. So I want you to pick up your hands like this and like cross your fingers, okay, all of you. And then I want you to do this, but close your eyes. Move your arm. Close your eyes. Move your arm slowly. And then get closer to here. And then with the two fingers, and please take a moment and pay attention. Try not to think. And just pay attention how that feels. How that feels. Like move your fingers up and down. Some people are laughing already. Okay, so the idea is that you were doing something, okay? And the way I describe doing is involves the senses, but also you were moving. You were moving your arm and touching involves movement. And some of you may also have started thinking about how ridiculous this is, and maybe you start laughing. And this thing that we do feels in a particular way. So in order to be there, you are actually feeling it. This is related to the idea of awareness. So you can be aware of both the sensory sensations, which are the actual, you're touching, so you feel that, and the emotional ones that I distinguish from the idea of emotions. I talk about emotional sensations, which are, for me, felt emotions, because emotions are the names we give to what we actually feel, which, for example, in some of you, after thinking, you thought this was kind of ridiculous or whatever, and you laughed. So something happened to your body, and you felt that too. And then we may distinguish the material. So you may have distinguished the nose. Or in my case, when I do this, I feel two noses. I don't know if anybody was able to feel that.